wheel here. Here, hold on. Hey, folks, welcome back to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. It's Tuesday, April 28th. I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. And today, folks, we're going to run a voter analysis in Colorado and talk about all the latest news in the markets and in politics as usual. We're going to get into some of the headlines today, that this show has typically been ignoring. But we're going to hit some of them. We're going to talk about the media ignoring Tara Reade. We're going to talk about a dozen or so states that are reopening their economies, which is pumping the market, Tim. So why don't we start there? Because now we have day two. It's early, but we have day two of some nice market moves, and we can get into Florida and everything when we come back. Because I had that yesterday, talking to people in the governor's orbit. And it's having an impact. What's going on out there, Tim? Talk to us about the markets.
I just think that the markets are really looking past first quarter earnings and even second quarter earnings. And this is the heaviest earnings reporting week for Q1 earnings. 40% of the Dow Jones Industrials are reporting earnings this week. 30% of the Standard & Poor's 500 are reporting earnings this week. Most companies are withdrawing all of their guidance for the remainder of the year. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. And investors are just looking past it. They're even looking past second quarter because they know that this is a temporary self-imposed shutdown. And they're just trying to look out and gauge what it's going to be like as the economy starts itself back up. How long is it going to take to get to 50% capacity, 75% capacity, and even beyond that? And what are the long-term implications going to be? There'll be some industries that will be favored. There'll be some businesses that will be, there'll be some winners and losers from this whole transition we're going through. And investors just aren't preoccupied right now by knowing whether or not somebody's earnings are down 20%, 30%, or 50%, because they know that it's, coming back.
Right. We got, go ahead. Finish it off.
The markets are having a second very good day in a row. Right now, the Dow is up about 150 points. It's about 0.75%. S&P a similar amount. NASDAQ a little bit less than that. Now, there were some NASDAQ stocks yesterday, like Amazon, like Microsoft, and Intel, maybe even had reported late last week, that closed near their lows of the day, despite the market acting very, very well. And I think that the majority of those stocks were the stocks that primarily benefited from the shutdown, like Amazon, anything to do with home internet buying, and anything to do with supporting or providing streaming services.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Try to get a Brio right now, folks. It's not easy. But if you guys haven't read the market update on the front, it's right on the front of PPD right now about, this really goes with the narrative that Tim and I have been telling you. Eventually, if the shutdown was to continue, right, then you would see markets trading on data again, economic data. The indicators would matter again. But so much of this, Tim, is already baked into the cake. I think at this point, everybody knows demand is the issue, from oil across the board. Unless, of course, you're in those industries that have benefited from this. But for the most part, demand is everyone's issue. Any hint that the states are going back to a plan to reopen their economies it's huge. It's huge news. It's welcomed news. Down in Florida yesterday, I tweeted out because, folks, if you got to ask me where I get it from by this point, have I ever told you something was wrong? I'm telling you, DeSantis is going to let that order expire. There will be, of course, all governors, Tim, are going to want to try to follow CDC guidelines and that three-phase plan that Trump put out. They don't want to be called irresponsible, right?
Of course.
So, right. So he's going, some things will open before others. And then there's a clear understanding that, big tourism areas in Florida that are going to be hurt really badly from this. There's an understanding that Disney's not going to just pop, hit their big, circuit breaker switch and turn everything back on. And the rides aren't going to start running across the street right away. That's understood. But DeSantis from the jump, from the beginning of this thing, he always did understand that there would be an economic impact to this and that there were two sides to this argument. So, given we have an older population, it makes sense that he's been trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about this than say Brian Kemp just doesn't have the same population in the same state and the same economy. That was always the difference with this idea the media wanted Trump to issue a nationwide order, which is probably unconstitutional. That's for a legal scholar to debate, but also just doesn't make sense as a practical policy prescription. We just have too many different scenarios here, Tim. Too many different scenarios. And I will say this, because the calendar, unlike yesterday, the calendar's full today. And, if you didn't watch the show the other day when Tim and I were talking about the housing market, hey, Tim, the 20 city seasonally adjusted, the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller, that's 0.4 percentage point.
Yeah.
That's a nice gain, folks. The 20 city actually is up. It's up 3.5%. Sorry about that. If you guys heard that, that was my mortgage broker beeping in. They don't know. But I don't know. You couldn't hear that on your end, right, Tim?
Right.
So the point is, if you're watching us talk about the National Association of Realtors, you have to take Yoon with a grain of salt, because he is the head of a lobby. Okay. But he's convinced that the housing market is going to lead the recovery because it was late to the show. It was late to the party. When during the Trump economy, Tim and I had been waiting for this. We saw builder confidence through the roof. We saw a whole bunch of ground level indicators that set the housing market to explode. But it wasn't a shock that it was late though, Tim, because that was the area of the economy that sparked the last recession. So, it took under Obama, everything was just slow to recover. So it took a little bit of time for that real tight labor market to put it in, put it in a position where people said, all right, let's pull the trigger. Let's get that home. It was just taking some time because the labor market under Obama wasn't particularly strong. It just wasn't. Those were methodological gimmicks being used to reduce unemployment. Labor participation was not rising. Wages weren't really rising, so what you need for housing to really take off again, that wasn't there. And until Trump. So a couple of years go by and we start to see this happen. And I'm happy to see this. If prices were dipping bad, folks, which they started to a little bit, but that's because they were overheated, right? Don't you think housing was starting to be overheated for the time being for a little bit?
I think it was very regional. Depending on where you were. I think that housing's still under pressure a little bit in the Northeast, particularly in the high real estate tax states from the SALT caps on maxing your deductions at 10 grand for a combination of state taxes and real estate taxes. I think that's had the biggest headwind effect in the Northeast and in other states with high real estate taxes.
Okay. So, that's a good point. And the point I was getting to anyway, which kind of, dovetails into this, Tim, if it wasn't something like that, and if there weren't other, reasons for it, and we just saw prices continue to decline like that, that would be a problem, but now we're not seeing that. And even in this, this is, it is lagging. What's this for that S&P? It's usually, so it's probably for March. So it's April now, right? So it's for March. It always lags a month. So, it is what it is. We'll see what April is next month, but that's not bad at all. We'll get the FHFA house price index. They always come right after each other. It might have came out at 10 o'clock actually, but sometimes these things lag a little bit. Tomorrow we get pending home sales, which is what we've been waiting for. So, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll bring that to people. But retail inventories, Tim, they're up. And that's not, if people weren't producing, I understand demand's down. But if there was going to be something really deep, then we would see those retail numbers. Last month they were negative 5/10 or something. And these things always move in small increments, folks. You're not going to see big 5-point jumps. It's just not how these indicators work. They're small moves, 0.3 of a percentage point, 0.6. So we're up 0.6 for this report. So at least people expect demand to come back. And the Texas manufacturing survey that took a dive again yesterday, which we put up on PPD, that is the only regional manufacturing survey that shows the optimism, the future, the outlook, like the 6-month outlook. How do you feel about business conditions in 6 months? This is the only one, Tim, where it was negative. The rest of them still, the Philly Fed, the Empire State, those manufacturing firms regionally, they expect business to be back again in 6 months. I mean, and those are monthly current surveys. So this one was a little different. Texas was different, but Texas was overheated.
It'll struggle to come back with oil, with the decline in the price of oil.
Did you get into that? Yeah, you did a little bit. That's right. I wanted to talk about oil a little bit, but you did.
Well, I didn't mention it yet, but we can
go ahead. Why don't
you? I did notice at the top of the hour, Conference Board consumer confidence came out 87, down from 118.
Pretty
close to consensus, actually.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Pretty close to consensus. I don't know how you would get so close to consensus when you're having a 30-point drop. But look, I still think it could be worse.
Yeah, right. It could be worse. Look, and consumer sentiment took a real dive, and it wasn't quite as high as the consumer confidence index. That's still not historically, Tim. Historically, they may come out, and I have to look at what Lynn Franco says about it when because it came out right as we went live. I didn't have a chance to look at it, but I don't know what Lynn Franco says about it. But it may be like some historic point decline or something, but it's certainly not a historic low.
No,
I mean, there are presidents who would have killed.
It would be interesting to see what the lows were at the lows of the global financial crisis 12 years ago.
Yeah, you want me to look that up?
It would just be an interesting. It would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah, here we go. The consumer.
If you want to look that up for a second, I'll just make a quick comment on oil.
Go ahead.
I did miss this yesterday. We're in the midst of some of my technological issues that were going on. Oil was down 25% yesterday, which we did mention. The market pretty much shrugged it off. It's down a little bit today. It's hovering around $12. Okay. What happened yesterday was, and if you go back to remember last Monday and Tuesday, we had this very, very sharp decline in the USO ETF, where the May contract was expiring. And the manager of that ETF had to sell all of their current month contracts that were going to expire. Probably had sold a lot of them the week before. Well, basically what they said was coming into yesterday, they are no longer going to carry front month contracts. So right now, June is the front month. It doesn't expire for about another 3.5 weeks. And the USO said they are going to switch out of all of their June contracts and buy much further out month contracts because they don't want to have this issue every month where 2 weeks before expiration, if they're trying to sell, which is what's in their charter, the front month and roll into the next month. If we continue to have these storage issues, and it will take a while to work off those storage issues, then you'll have this very, very sharp plunge of oil down into the single digits, maybe even potentially threatening to go negative again, although I think that was probably a one-time event.
Right.
And so they said that by Thursday, the USO, US oil ETF, will have transitioned all of its front month contracts to further out months. And this morning, Standard & Poor's, which has some ETFs that has oil contracts in it also, I don't know exactly which ones, but they said that they're going to do the same thing. So really, that's why the market is shrugging off this very sharp decline in the price of oil we've had the last 2 days that had such an impact in the market last Monday and Tuesday.
You know, Tim, I just brought up the consumer confidence index to circle back. And look, I don't know if you can see that where you're at. I'm sure you can if you peek over.
I
But
can't really see
I
it.
mean, there we have the shaded gray areas, folks, are prior recessions. Here we have the 86.9 that just came out. It was down from there was a revised. It was revised to 118.8 last month. So that's
Right.
why we see such a sharp decline. I didn't put the range selector on there, and I just went in the back end real quick. Instead of showing you what it looks like on PPD, I just went into the back end of the program that creates these charts just to show you the gray areas indicate prior recessions. Tim, the low during the financial crisis at February 2009 was 25.
Yeah.
25.
So we're nowhere near that.
Not even close. If we go back to the recession, in the early 2000s, that wasn't bad at all. I mean, the low there was 85.3.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a deep recession.
No, that was not.
And then you have the Herbert Walker Bush early 90s recession, which essentially started to end before he was before he was defeated. But that's how the cookie crumbles. That low, Tim, was 55.1 in February of 1991. I mean, the 1980s recession's 56.7. That's their low, and that was in April of 82. And I'll just go back one more because it's deeper than the 50.1 in June 1980. That 70s recession that we talked about.
Yeah.
That was the deepest one since the Great Recession. And back then, their low for that recession was 43.2. So, folks, I mean, I have to go back and I'll look at what, Franco says about it, but I bet you it may be some historic 1 month point decline. It may not be, looking at that chart. I've seen some pretty big dives. This one does look like a significant dive.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
There was a huge dive in the 70s from 80.8 to 60.5. That is one of the bigger ones that I'm seeing right now. So, if there's something that can't beat 22 points, the point is we're still not, pun intended, we're still not at that low, Tim. We're not even close, so we'll see what it is next month. The good news is we have a dozen states reopening or trying to reopen their states. And that is critical. The time is critical here. It really is.
I would think that one of the biggest difference between what we're seeing now in consumer confidence and what we saw 12 years ago in the global financial crisis was that the future expectations index has got to be much higher now than it was at the trough of the decline 12 years ago.
Yeah, I bet. I don't want to, maybe I'll go back and I'll look that up. We'll circle back to that tomorrow and go in it in more detail because by then we'll have all three indicators, the current conditions, the future, and then the overall index. We'll have that all up. But I wanted to show people quickly, this is why time is of the essence, right? I mean, if we were to continue to go down this path, things would get really much uglier. And it's ugly now, but it's striking. With 30 million Americans filing initial jobless claims almost, it's striking to me, and by the time we get to Thursday, it will be 30. It's striking to me that we're still at 85 point whatever.
Right.
86.9. That's kind of stunning, Tim. Same thing with the sentiment index. It didn't really go down anymore. So consumers are so important. And by the way, if you go inside that index, if you go inside the consumer sentiment index, even during historic highs, Democrats are just like reporting what their partisan feelings are. If you go and break it down by party, even during the highest of the boom, Democrats were quite negative. They were in, Richard Curtin has even mentioned that we have never seen such a partisan split. The largest one ever measured was under Barack Obama. And then it's more than double that under Donald Trump. The gap between partisans, independents are a little lower than what Republicans, their level of optimism, but still they're in the same universe. Democrats are all alone in their own universe, Tim, of negativity. I mean, it really goes to show you how the big media hate machine can cause real damage to the economy, right? I mean, we're still a consumer-based economy.
70% of GDP is basically the consumer.
That's right. Them pushing an alternate reality it can have an impact. So I know that the media has been wounded, and they've lost a lot of their credibility, but they
Right.
can still do damage. They can, and that's a perfect example of real world damage there. Speaking of which, before we get into anything else you want to mention? Because I do want to wade into some waters here that we've been kind of avoiding on the show. But while we're talking about the media, Tim, I gotta wade into some of these waters. So, anything else you want to add to the economy before we move on?
Look, I think that to a large extent, investors, the same way they're looking past corporate earnings and they're not really phased at all by companies withdrawing their full guidance for all of fiscal 2020. In fact, I think a lot of them think it's the right thing to do. They're also looking past any of these economic indicators that show historic or near historic drop-offs to levels that you typically see near the depths of a recession, because they view it as very temporary.
Yeah, artificial. Basically artificial.
Right.
It's something we're in uncharted territory here.
Right.
Really, we've never had a
we're going to get the first look at GDP tomorrow.
Yes.
It's forecasts are maybe around, I think that they're around -4.
-3.7 is our consensus.
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
A low of
-4.3, -3.7. I have -4.3 over here. I don't think it's going to, I don't know if it could be that low. I think you've got to have March at minus 10%.
Yeah,
for that to be -4.
Yeah,
I can do the math real quick, but
you're not talking about the other 2 months, Tim. And
right, and you were tracking at +3% after February, so that's 2/3 of the month. So if you had a +3 and a +3, and then you had a -10, that would be -4. I just don't know that the economy was down 10% in March. We started to shut down the second week in March. A lot of businesses did, some restaurants did, some hotels did. The travel ban went into effect much earlier than that from China. But then we didn't really get the first round of the CDC shelter-in-place social distancing guidelines until the weekend in the middle of March, probably on a Sunday, going into Monday, which was the 16th.
And
so you're talking we were only really shut down for half of that month.
And if you look, even this morning, we had the trade in goods balance, right? It was much deeper than we thought. It was 64.2 billion, as opposed to consensus was 55, and the prior was it was under 60, 59.9. For those who don't know, trade deficits slice off of the more narrow the trade gap, the more it will slice off of. The less it will slice from GDP. Right. The bigger the trade gap, the bigger toll it takes on GDP. Right. Okay. That's for people who don't know. This is just trade in goods. When you add the services component and you get the trade balance, you're talking about in the 40s. Okay. Because services take away from that deep deficit for goods. Under the Trump administration, we've seen a narrowing largely over time of those goods, definitely a narrowing of the trade deficit overall. And in March, March was worse than it was expected to be among goods, but it's not going to be that way with services. And the prior to, like you said, March would need to offset the trade imbalance for, and I can even go back and look at this, the trade imbalance for the rest of the quarter is low. The gap was low.
Was lessening.
It was, yeah. It's loading up now. It's a huge database going back to years and years and years. So it's loading. taking some time, but it would have to be significant. I'll have to look, because this would be interesting to know. Actually, I'll look while we're chatting, but I just have a hard time buying that, Tim. I do. I have a really hard time. Dealing when before all of this happened, what were we talking about? Maybe a slight negative, a couple tenths of a percentage point to a slight positive. That was the range before all of this happened. And I don't know. I'm having a hard time swallowing the idea that it would be this deep for the month of March alone. I don't know, Tim. And again, the first quarter is a throwaway quarter, usually, or it was under Obama. It hasn't been. Look, February, negative 39. With the trade gap was only negative 39 and change. It was under 40,
Right.
42 the next month. We don't know what the full number will be.
So for the entire quarter, and we don't have the services side of that yet for March.
We don't.
For the whole quarter, you'll probably have a decline.
Yeah. So if that's baked into the GDP number, I'm wondering if people are overestimating how much that gap widened. We'll see. We're going to find out tomorrow, right? And that's an advanced estimate,
Look, if you're an economist and you're ever going to miss your projections, this is the time to miss them, because you can just say it's just too many extraneous factors that, throw the numbers off. And again, this is the initial look at GDP. I'm sure it will be revised, and I'm sure it will be revised lower. In fact, another reason I don't think the advance is going to be down as much as -4 is because any of the data that's probably not in yet that will be part of the revision will probably be data for later in the quarter, which would be the period of time when we were starting to shut down or definitely shut down the last 2 weeks of March. So, look, whatever it comes in at, I think when it's revised, it'll end up being revised a little bit lower.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's going to happen. So, wow, we blazed through the first quarter already. Let me just give a sneak peek into what we're going to do today. And then we'll go through, because we just wanted to that was a lot of economic data to stuff into 30 minutes, Tim, but we did it even on the fly. Because there was just so much that came out while Tim and I were talking that we tried to, bring it to you as it came, but actually I'm looking at that housing market. And I'm pretty stoked by that. I really am. Those numbers are rising as long as inventory's there. And there's big in the middle of the summer to late summer, there's big bounce backs in the labor market. Then we could turn this thing around. We could. And that's what I've been, worried about the whole time. But after our little update real quick in a few minutes, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some other stuff. We'll talk about, some of the other states. We'll talk about a couple of headlines that are in the news before we move on to Colorado. And we're going to talk about, there's a lot of, I know the president's campaign manager, Brad Parscale, is very bullish on states like Colorado and New Mexico. And for those of you who follow me, you know that I am skeptical of these states. And I will show you why. And I'll show you what would need to be done for Trump to carry states like this. All right. We'll compare what Trump did in 2016 to the last best performing Republican candidate. And, that will by the time I'm done showing you different maps, it'll highlight the challenges that he has and where he would need. Now, if you're Brad, though, Tim, and I don't want to get into it too much, but if you're Brad and you have data showing that your, numbers among Hispanic independents in that state are much better, then you'll see why he does have, if his data is telling him that. If their polling is telling them that, then you'll see why they are more optimistic than I am, But again, and just as a caveat here, I haven't polled Colorado in a while, but I will tell you this. I nailed it in 2016. Nailed it. Tens of percentage points, folks. She gained that last bit of undecided vote. They're demographically favorable to Democrats, and they broke to her in the end. It was close. And it was closer than people expected it to be, right, Tim? I mean, it wasn't a 10-point blowout,
no.
But they couldn't call that state for hours and hours. It was close. Right. But I'll show you where he needs to pick up the pace if he wants to win. Then we'll talk a little bit about Kim Jong-un, and Trump was funny yesterday with that. That's textbook Trump. We'll talk about that again, since we did cover that when they started the speculation. And then I want to get, like I said, normally we don't touch this stuff, Tim, but I want to talk a little bit about Tara Reid for a reason. I mean, everybody deserves the presumption of innocence, but we also haven't seen this level of cooperation, and so we'll get into that. It's 10:30 already. There we go. So it's 10:30, folks, on Tuesday, April 28th. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. Follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. If you don't already, I am joined by Tim the Source Anderson. Follow him on Twitter, folks, at TJ Anderson1. And I keep stressing this every show because it's true. Check out his Twitter feed, especially when he throws off those threads in the morning. All right. So follow him at TJ Anderson1. If you are watching on Periscope, I shot out links. I hear you guys. I shot out links to the YouTube. It's crisp and clear there. If you have issues on Periscope, which I know a lot of you guys watch on Periscope, if you have issues on it, it's glitching. I'm going to send those links out maybe a few times during the show to be able to give you, an easy way to just hop off and go to YouTube. It's much easier. When you get to YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the page. We are building subscribers and need to keep doing that to hit that milestone. And like us and give those, like the videos, give us those thumbs up. And then also Facebook Live viewers, also very crisp. Subscribe to the page for both YouTube and Facebook Live. If you like the page or subscribe to the channel, it will notify you when I send the alert out. When we send it out, it's about half an hour before the show, sometimes more. And it'll remind you and let you know when we're going to go on live, so you don't have to try to play catch up, which I see a lot of people do. All right. So go ahead and do that. And then the ultimate way to support the show is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. You can go to peoplespunditdaily.com and look at the digital subscriptions, or the short link, ppdnews.us/subscribe, ppdnews.us/subscribe. And I just want to take a minute here to thank people who have done that since this show started. There's no doubt, and we love you for it. And that's how we bring you guys these charts. Get to a point where this will be a lot of bells and whistles. If you guys keep it up, it'll be great. All right. And then maybe I can keep Tim off the trading floor longer. All right. So here we go. Let's get into, speaking of Tim, let's get into this market update, Tim. I'm going to go and grab that URL for people who need it, and I will be back in a minute. What's going on out there?
So the market's a little bifurcated today. The Dow is up about 0.75%. The S&P 500 is up just less than 0.5%. NASDAQ's actually down 0.25%. A little bit of underperformance there, but I'm okay with that because the NASDAQ started the day more than 3.5% above its 200-day moving average. It has clearly led the charge of the rally off the March 23 lows. And a lot of NASDAQ stocks maybe need to at least take a little bit of a breather. Some of them have participated extraordinarily well from the extreme ramp up in streaming services and anything to do with online technology issues. Intel certainly highlighted that in their conference call late last week. So for some of those stocks, maybe to take a little bit of a breather, and I'm perfectly fine with that. The Russell is outperforming again today like it did yesterday. It was up 4% yesterday, the Russell 2000, where the Dow and the S&P were up 1.5%. So again, that's a little bit of mean reversion since the Russell underperformed so much on the way down from the high in February to the lows in March. The Russell declined 43%. That's a ridiculous amount. So it's getting some of that back now.
And this is now the second week where the Russell outperformed, right? And then we had like 2 weeks before that it did, and it signaled a nice pop. So, you know, that was nice. People who watch every day, they know the difference between the Russell and the, and what trades on the Russell. You want to give them a quick 15 seconds? Because I can tell you right now that people watching today that haven't been watching.
Sure. So the Russell 2000 is a widely followed small cap index. And the Russell Investment Services is a service somewhat like Standard and Poor's, where they have lists of thousands of stocks, and the Russell 2000 is really stocks in market cap rank 1,000 through 3,000. So it's definitely the smaller cap names of their universe, typically names
Movers
that just can't go real easily and do like large debt offerings in the open market. I've got a sneeze coming out just a second here.
That's all right. I'll take it. They're moving
Sorry
stock
about that.
too. There's more risk associated with them.
More risk, higher risk names, but also potentially some small cap growth names. And stocks that typically, if you're going to see an economic downturn, they will get hit the hardest.
When I used to trade, Tim, I did not work for someone who appreciated trade. They were like a firm. Well, I worked for a couple, but the last one I ended at, they were like long-term investment people. Yep. But because I came from, like Paulson, traders, right. And that's where I learned. I would look always to the, I had clients that, it was the Russell. That's where I go. And they would, give me a mover, Rich. Give me a mover. Because some people are just addicted to it. And it's your job to keep them away from that. Like, listen, Joe, whatever, you're supposed to be long-term. And this is your child's, this is your child's Kellogg here. Don't mess it up. But, they would, when I had clients who had the money and could assume the risk. So we would have some fun, you know, and boy, they hated it. The last firm I was at, because that's just not what they did. That was not what they did. Right. But, I remember as you were talking about it, I was thinking of the smallest of small, Kramer, he used to have a show. What was the name of that show he used to have? I forgot the name. Jim Kramer had a show where he would give that's how long ago it is since I've traded.
Well, he has this show now. It's probably been going on 10 years now called Mad Money.
Mad Money. That's it. Yeah.
So he still does that.
He still does it.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget this. I'm looking, and I don't know, somebody had told me it's like a whisper thing, on the street about, you remember Bookham? You remember that?
I don't know if I remember that.
Oh man. And I saw this little stock, this little small cap, and a couple of people that I had that were like the way I was just telling you about. I'm like, listen, I think I'm liking Bookham. Let's play around with Bookham. Cut a little, there wasn't much volume, so some of these buys were already bumping the stock around. That night, Jim Kramer goes on Mad Money and puts a buy on Bookham.
Oh my God.
The stock went to it was one of his biggest moves ever. And I couldn't believe it, Tim. I looked like a genius. I looked like a genius. I wasn't even I had no idea he was going to do that. I had no idea. It was just one of those very lucky things. And I will never forget that. Once you give a client a trade like that, they never question you again. They never question you again. Like you just made me 28% and less than, less than a trading session. Just I'll shut up and you tell me what to do. Some of them made even more. It just depends. Because for people who don't know, sometimes you're looking at the trading price, but then you go to get in on that trading price and it's not what's being offered for you. So you may see it's trading at like $7.50, but then you go and buy it and it's really going to cost you almost $9 a share or something. If that's what happens when a stock moves that quick. But I don't want to give stock advice, just a little trip down memory lane, because some of that stuff was very fun, guys. I really did enjoy it quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. Tim, he knows he's on Wall Street. The way it used to be back in the day, very high energy. I'm a high energy person. The pits were awesome. It just was a great time. It was a good time. As long as you're doing right by your clients, it's a good time. And I got out when the financial crisis, right before the financial crisis happened. I got very lucky, and so did my clients. But it was a terrible time for other people who did not. Okay, so let's move on. So I do want to talk about this Kim Jong-un story real quick. Okay, just for a little while, because Trump is just so funny. Okay, this is where Trump really just makes me crack up. So last week, there's speculation running abound that Kim Jong-un is in deep trouble. He could be brain dead. One report said, right? NBC News said he was brain dead. Multiple U.S. sources say he's brain dead. Okay. Meanwhile, multiple U.S. sources are telling me they don't know. All right. They don't have a clue. It's hard. North Korea is like you said, they don't call it the hermit kingdom for nothing.
Right.
They don't share stuff, especially about leaders. We have no intelligence capabilities over there. That's just truth. It's sad. It's very minimal. Media reporting is
We've
notoriously
got our
wrong.
sources, but it's not like in other,
It is not like that.
it's
Yeah,
not
right.
like in other countries. A lot of it's educated guesses and satellite photos,
That's right. And
patching stuff together.
so the speculation is like running amok about this guy's health, and CNN says that he's in grave danger. Remember that?
Yeah.
So let me just look at a couple of things. Reuters was very smart with this. Reuters said, listen, just what I just told you. It's very difficult. Intelligence gathering and media reporting are both notoriously wrong with this country. We don't have good information on it. Reuters did a very good job, and they just simply said these are what other people are reporting. And it's important to note the Daily NK is an online for people who don't know it. It's an online newspaper. It's based in South Korea, but it's mostly run by defectors, Tim. I mean, I'm not saying that their information is bad. It's just that they have an incentive to want to take some of this stuff and run, even though it doesn't live up to the editorial standards and guidelines that a U.S. media outlet should follow. But that didn't stop CNN. That didn't stop NBC News. In the end, and I don't want to say anything here because I'm just saying from what we hear, in the end, Jack Posobiec may have been the closest to accurate as to what's going on out here. He reported on Twitter. I don't know if One American News put it up. I didn't look, but he did say that he has it from a couple of sources that he caught the coronavirus. Turns out Reuters reported that they sent a team from China to oversee what was going on with Kim Jong-un.
Right.
The guy is fat. He's overweight. He's unhealthy. He smokes. He eats too much. He does a lot of other things too much. He likes his vices. So he is the perfect kind of target for something like a coronavirus to really do damage to.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's possible that the U.S. people don't really know, or at least maybe the president does, is where I'm going with this. But it does seem that there was at least some potential from what we're hearing for him to have been exposed to the coronavirus, that there is good enough reason to believe that may be in fact what happened. Anyway, China sent a team. Nobody know, they're being very tight they're holding, very tight to the vest on what happened. But that's the best thing we can. He's missed a lot of public appearances, which is why a lot of the speculation. Yesterday, Trump comes out and he basically says he's fine. I know he's fine. He's not brain dead. He's not brain dead. He's not dead. He's, you guys will find out in a couple of days. So you got to think the White House is the center of information in the world. For people who don't know this, the White House is the information hub. It's the center of the world of information. It is the most and typically most accurate information goes through the Oval Office. So if anyone knows, it's him, right? So what did you see that? Did you catch that yesterday?
Yeah, I missed most of yesterday's presser.
It's just funny how he does it, though. You know, it's like, don't you worry a little hard over it. Don't you? It's like he's picking up like some Southern mannerisms,
Yeah.
Don't you worry a little hard about it. He's gonna be okay. I know he's all right. But in the event, and that was a great question, in the event something happens to Kim Jong-un, his sister takes over. Okay. Or
that's
at least
up for debate.
Theoretically. Right.
One of the two.
That is,
there's allegedly two branches of that family that might,
yeah, go ahead.
Disagree on it, but
but that is who would, or at least theoretically should, but she will. I imagine she will be contested. Could you imagine a communist dictatorship? That would be the first one run by a woman, wouldn't it?
Probably,
if she was to take over, that would be the first one run by a woman. Well, I'll tell you what, you'd find out real quick that gender does not dictate the brutality of that ideology. You would find that out real fast. A woman's touch, Tim, is not going to soften the edges of that regime. There's just that's a fantasy. And I forgot her name. I don't even want to pronounce her name, but sometimes she writes for the New York Times. And yesterday on Twitter, She said, even North Korea is more progressive than us. I mean, you believe this one? You know, what is wrong with these people, Tim? I mean, this is like some of these people have like, it's not just a difference in opinion. They're sick in their heads. I dare you to go to North Korea and test that little theory you put out on Twitter. You know, I mean, this is a woman who writes for the New York Times, even the New York. When are we going to have, just because you have a female leader does not make you progressive. Your ideology makes you what is called truly progressive. And our founding fathers used that word all the time. They did. They just meant it in a different way. Progressive meant that you were getting closer to the state, you know, the more natural state of liberty that your God intended you to live under. You know, that is, and you know, and that you were, I don't know what Abraham Maslow would call like self-actualization. You were the best you could be, you know, kind of thing. And, you know, these people are so far adrift from reality. Yeah. Okay. So they got a female leader. They'd be progressive. They'd still have the prisons, you know, the lights from space wouldn't shine any brighter, you know, next to the South at all. Not until they completely liberalize their economy will any of that happen, you know? Oh, wow. Somebody said, and I'm just going to answer that. How would you like to be the person if let's say it turns out he caught the coronavirus. How would you like to be the person who gave Kim Jong-un the coronavirus? That's what somebody said on one of their comments. Oh, wow.
Well, how would you prove, given that how asymptomatic some people are, it'd be very difficult to prove where he got it from.
You think they care if they knew somebody was symptomatic and he had been even if that person wasn't necessary? Like, wow. You know, I could see that. It's going to be a bad day. Yeah. So, and then also, because, wow, this little news segment's moving quick. The second thing I want to talk to you about here is this Business Insider report that came out now on the heels of somebody digging up Tara Reid's phone call, the archive of Tara Reid's phone call to Larry King Live. And normally we wouldn't touch stuff like this, folks, but I'm bringing this up because the entire point of People's Pundit Daily and the entire point of this show as a piggyback off of it with data journalism, the entire point was because of how just bad the media became. And I don't want to favor one side or the other. I just want somebody to balance the scale. You know, it's so ideological. It's factually incorrect now, the media, you know, and that was the entire point of that. So, which is why I want to bring up this segment, even though it's something I would normally not touch, Tim. The New York Times said they did an exhaustive, that's the word they use, an exhaustive dive, you know, journalistic dive into these allegations and Biden's prior behavior. The New York Times didn't, find her former neighbor. They sure as hell went around looking for everybody else's former neighbor, Tim, when it was Roy Moore, right? I mean, could you imagine if Tara Reid got caught faking a yearbook? When it was Roy Moore, when it was Brett Kavanaugh, which Roy Moore I'm not going to defend because a lot of the stuff he did, I believe, or at least was alleged, I believe, and I don't particularly like, you know, but I'm just saying it's a standard here, you know. Brett Kavanaugh, they destroyed that man in front of his frame, or tried. If he wouldn't have been confirmed after they were done with him, if he wouldn't have been confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court, how would he ever have went back to the D.C. Court of Appeals with that on his record, a stain like that? His nomination was rejected because he was barraged by a slew of not credible women who accused him of being a gang rapist. And they said they did an exhaustive deep dive on Tara Reid's allegations. They didn't find the mother's archive.
Right.
They didn't find her neighbor. She was clear about who she said she told that story to. And they didn't find that crap, Tim. That's called contemporaneous evidence, folks. And it's admissible in a court of law. Unlike all of these allegations we saw in 2016 against Donald Trump. Do you remember? There's like one every couple of days, right? They're all unlike that. Unlike Christine Blasey Ford, who I don't find credible and never did. I think she's sick. I think there's something wrong with her and she needs help. It's sad. But her own father walked up to Brett Kavanaugh's dad on the golf course and apologized for his daughter smearing the man. Everybody except people who believe the mainstream media knows she was lying. Everybody, including people in her own circles. But that didn't stop the media from diving and twisting and diving and twisting and smearing and twisting and diving and smearing. You get my point, right? And it's not just, Brett Kavanaugh just is probably one of the worst, examples. But Tim, talk to me about this. They couldn't find these women, these people. They couldn't find the archive. I don't buy this at all.
No, I don't think too many people do. I mean, they couldn't, it's pretty clear that almost no effort went into that. They were just supporting a narrative.
It reminds me of the lieutenant governor of Virginia,
right?
The sexual assault allegations against him,
right?
With all of the ones against Trump, with all of the ones against Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, Julie Swetnick was a joke, Tim. For NBC to even put her on television, that was horrific without any kind of corroboration. They put this woman on television. They sat her down for an interview with the now disgraced slip and fall scumball, all right, Michael Avenatti.
Right.
They put and allowed this man who everybody, I don't know Brett Kavanaugh, but everybody who does says he was a wonderful guy.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Everybody, all you'll hear about from the media is, everybody says Joe Biden's a wonderful guy. Tim, there has been, with all of these other allegations, there has not been this level of corroboration. That is, the mother's phone call is contemporaneous. It demonstrates that element of her story was true. It's not just the story of the sexual assault when you're investigating these crimes. It's not just whether or not they investigate the assault itself. It's the rest of the victim or alleged victim's story that has to jive. Like Anita Hill didn't. It fell apart when the FBI interviewed her. This is different. I'm not saying Joe Biden deserves his presumption of innocence, but the standard here from the media is really bad. I mean, the double standard is really bad because here we actually do have elements of her story now being borne out as truth. I mean, that she told her mother, her sibling, her neighbor. Business Insider found her former neighbor. They found her. I mean, that's bad. The point, what's bad is that they corroborated it. And then what kind of mother would call Larry King live in the early 90s? Right? Just think about that. Who would call Larry King live with a story like that in the early 90s? It's not like it is today, folks. You don't just go accusing anybody, and you certainly don't call Larry King on CNN. And if you watch why, listen to the rest of that. Listen to the rest of the panel. Find a bigger clip. Find the entire segment if you can. Go, listen beyond when her mother calls. The guests on Larry's panel begin to basically victim shame after that. You know why? Because probably a lot of this stuff was known back then. I think people don't understand that senators on both sides of the aisle have a very long history of not knowing how to keep their hands to themselves. This is not new, Tim. And that goes, I could name a Republican senator right now. I'm not going to do it, but I can name a very well-known, very well-liked by Republican voters, Republican senator who is known for having sticky hands. This is not unknown. So what I can't help, if you watch the rest of that panel, I can't help but to think that some of this stuff maybe was known to him already. This wasn't a secret. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because you know what I'm talking about. These guys are known For this is not like, oh my God, how could
Right.
this have happened? No, folks, it's an open secret.
Well, I mean, that's you got it. That's the primary reason that the names of people on the list who have had aides or people in their office or other accusers paid off by the slush fund in the House have never been released.
We need that list. We need that list.
Yes,
we really need that
absolutely.
list. I know of somebody who got close to get. He may, I don't know. He may have some of the names. He obviously did. I mean, if it wasn't for Mike Cernovich, who the media hates, if it wasn't for Mike Cernovich, what's his name would still be there? Connors.
John Conyers, yeah.
He'd still be there.
Absolutely.
He'd still be there right now, paying off people with your money. Your money. Right. They're taking our money and paying women to be silent. And I wouldn't even be shocked if some of them were paying men to be silent. Right. I mean, it doesn't only happen one way, but I'm talking about male legislators, right, assaulting male staffers or making unwanted passes. I mean, it's not just what people think. Yeah, well, there's young female interns there. Of course, that's always been the old way to do it, but I would tell you guys to not keep your mind, open your mind to bigger and worse things, because, it doesn't discriminate is my point. It doesn't discriminate. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And I just listened to the rest of that panel, and I can't help but to think one of those people on that panel might have known or had an idea, that, well, it could be so-and-so. It could be this, because it's just not something that's really a secret. And the media, which is the point, I guess, of all of this, the media, this is beyond what they did to Brett Kavanaugh was a new low. I mean, really a new low, not just the media, but the Democrats. I think they probably gave Republicans, I think that hurt people like Bill Nelson. I think it hurt people like Claire McCaskill. I think it hurt people like Joe Donnelly, in not left-wing states, there's not a whole lot you could do about that. But the Kavanaugh controversy, that nomination fight, that turned a lot. I was polling North Dakota, it was a client. I was polling North Dakota, Tim, and I mean, she was always like an underdog, but it wasn't the blowout that it ended up being before Kavanaugh, and then it scared.
Where that raised that was a double-digit result, right?
Yeah, that was like 12 points,
12,
something
13,
like that.
Something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was when we were polling it, we were giving them 3 different models, electorate models, where it would be a normal midterm, it would be a high Republican turnout midterm, it would be a high Democratic turnout midterm. And under the high Democratic turnout scenario, there was a scenario in which Heitkamp could have held on by anywhere between 0.2 to about 2.5%, depending on the break between independents, because independents were going to Heidi Heitkamp. Before Kavanaugh, they were going to Heidi Heitkamp by a big margin. And you know what? After the break, I'll pull that poll up. They were going to Heidi Heitkamp by a pretty big margin. And then after or during Kavanaugh, that just completely collapsed. They scared the hell out of people. That scared people in places like that, South Dakota and in Indiana, definitely in Florida, even though, again, I think Rick Scott was always going to win that race. I just think they strengthened Rick Scott's argument by doing that. And, they strengthened a lot of people's arguments, but in the end, that was not going to be that big of a margin until they did that. And then it widened out to 14 points was one of our, because we polled it several times. Kramer had a 14-point lead, then a 17, I think, was his biggest lead. 17. And then after the Kavanaugh effect started, because it did dissipate, before the election, it just never fully went away. And in states like that, it was really exacerbated. So there was no chance anymore for Heidi Heitkamp to hold on. And by the time that was all said and done, even in the high Democrat turnout scenario, it wasn't going to work for her, which, by the way, she somewhat got. She got between a normal, within the three that we mapped out, the electorate ended up between normal midterm break, not turnout levels, but normal midterm break, to high Democrat scenario. And she still got clobbered. That's why, though, she only got clobbered by about 12 instead of 17, or even it could have been worse. It really could have been. If those independents didn't go back to her a little bit, they swung. They were for her by double digits, big double digits. And then it tightened to 7, which was just not enough. That was bloody, because there's so many more Republicans. So that was going to be an embarrassing defeat. And then it eventually widened back out again. So she wound up winning them, but not by much, and it just definitely wasn't enough. All right. Wow. 11 o'clock. Woo. Let's do our break. I just had to bring that up. We normally don't wade into those waters, folks, but this one gets me a little bit because of what they did to Kavanaugh, and the bias is so bad. I mean, it's not even bias anymore. It's just ideological corruption, folks. That's what it is. It's a corruption, but not traditional. And it is a bias, but it's more than that. So, that's where I come up with that little phrase, ideological corruption. You're welcome. When I see them like that, I'll do it again, Joyce, All right. So let's go through our little break. And then when we come back, we're going to get into Colorado. And I saw the other somebody tag Brad and said, you should watch this and listen. He should. I hope he does. Because, he's a very smart guy, but not a pollster. He's just not by trade. And, if I was him, I would want, different opinions too, so let's get into this here. 11:01 on Tuesday, April 28th. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You can follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim, the Source Anderson. Folks, follow him along at TJ Anderson 1. At TJ Anderson 1 on Twitter. All right. And he's going to give us a market update in a second. And I'll be right back and we'll get into Colorado. But if while I disappear for a hot minute, I will shoot the YouTube link again to people on Periscope. So if you are watching on Periscope, then you can get that link. Some people say, it's not as good. YouTube is crisp. But, go ahead if you are on Periscope and give us the hearts and follow the account you're following along at. But if you guys from Periscope find yourselves over at YouTube, just like Facebook Live, go ahead and like the page, subscribe to the page, the channel, and it will notify you right before we go live about 30 minutes ahead of time. This way it gives you time to get to where you're going. And don't forget to like and, share the videos with your friends and family. So ultimately, the best way to subscribe or support the show is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. You could do that by going to peoplespunditdaily.com and finding one of our digital subscriptions, or you could just take the short link, which will redirect you there, and that's ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. And I do want to take a minute today. I haven't in the past, but over the last week or so, from those who have gone there and done that, I want to take a minute and thank you guys for that, because that's how we bring you this. That's how we'll expand it. And that's how we bring you all the nice big databases of maps and stuff that we're going to come back and share with you when I get back to do Colorado. All right. But for now, let's go to Tim and check the market update. And I'll be back in about 2 minutes. Is that okay, Tim?
Yep.
All right. Take it away.
Stocks are quite a bit off their highest levels of the day and lower than they were when we checked about 45 minutes ago. We're 90 minutes into the trading day. The Dow is down 25 points. That's less than 0.1%. It was down a little bit more 5 minutes ago. I just think there's some very well-deserved profit taking from the move we've had in the last really a little over 3 weeks. Even though last week was a little bit of a down week, the markets reacted very well after the sharp declines last Monday and Tuesday. We'd gotten back most of those losses with yesterday's rally added in. The NASDAQ is down maybe a full percent. That's the largest decline among the averages. And even the Russell 2000, which was up close to 2% earlier, is now only up about 0.3%. So it'll be interesting to see how this day, if it turns into a complete reversal, where we have a meaningful decline on the day, or whether some of the buyers that were in the market from yesterday during the advance come back in if stocks get the levels that they were at during the day yesterday. Oil is down a little bit also. That's really a technical move from some of the ETFs, not just the USO that owns oil contracts, but also some of the Standard & Poor's ETFs that have oil exposure shifting out of that front month contract, so they don't run into that same squeeze that they had last Monday and Tuesday, where all of a sudden the contract's expiring in a very short period of time. Nobody wants to own it because the storage capabilities are just so.
I'll give him a second. All right, this happens sometimes with Tim. He'll bump back in when he can. Last time I thought it did, I was over talking him. So I try to give him a second or so before I start to over talk him. But it is 11:06. So if he doesn't pop back in here real quick, I'll let him finish his thought if he does. But if he doesn't, then I'm going to jump into Colorado, which I think, you know what, I'll do. Okay, little word about Colorado before I start this. And I'm going to give Tim a quick little bing to let him know he's off, so he's not running without it. But it is not impossible. It is not impossible for a Republican candidate to win the state of Colorado, okay? It isn't impossible, but it isn't easy, all right? I'm giving you this little prep before we run this, because I know what the raw numbers say, and you guys are going to say, oh my God, Trump can win this state. I'm going to explain more in detail. All right. And then we'll look at why Brad is bullish on it. But I'll explain, most importantly, what it would take for a Republican to win this thing, where he fell short last time. And we're going to compare it to the last time a Republican presidential candidate won the state of Colorado. And that's going to highlight perfectly where, number one, Donald Trump fell short in 2016. Why? And then also why other Republican candidates did fall short as well. In 2000, George W. Bush beat Al Gore in the state of Colorado. He got just under 51% of the vote. Al Gore got 42.4 if you round it, right? So George Bush 50.8, Al Gore 42.4, and Ralph Nader was there, and he got 5.25 basically. All right. So Democrats had complained, well, if he wasn't there, then if Ralph Nader wasn't there, he'd have been able to carry the state. That I warned Democrats about that argument the same way I'd warned Republicans about the idea that Gary Johnson cost Donald Trump the election. Okay. And it cost him that state. And others too have said New Mexico and other states. If you've been watching the show, folks, then you know, and Tim's back, I'm going to beep him in. If you've been watching the show, folks, then you know that I warn you about doing that. You cannot, unless you go back and research these people thoroughly, you cannot just assume that those third-party candidates took votes away from a party that you think is most closely associated with them. And I'm prefacing that because Clinton only carried Colorado by less than 3 points. It was 47.2 to 44.4, which again, we nailed. All right. Very close. Gary Johnson took 5% of the vote. Jill Stein took 1.3%. Epic McMullen took a point. And there was almost a half a point for a guy named Castle. I think it was a Castle, I think, but whatever. It took about a half a point. The difference there is about, close to 70,000 votes. About 72, almost on the money, actually. So when I see Tim's getting himself set up, because I know he's interested in the state as well, and I'll bring him in a second. I wanted to preface that because when I run this voter analysis right now, which you see in your side of the screen, you're going to say they can win it. Republicans can win it. They can, but they'd have to do something like Cory Gardner did. And maybe I'll link that article. It was an article I wrote after the 2014 midterm elections about Cory Gardner defeating Mark Udall, the incumbent, in 2014 in Colorado. And Democrats at the time had said that it was turnout and that had it been a presidential election cycle, then Mark Udall would have held on. That's not true. That's not what happened. And I ran the numbers. I'll link it and I'll put it out there for those diehard people who want to read it later. We modeled the electorate to a 2012 electorate. It would have shaved just a hair off of Cory Gardner's margin. In the end, Cory Gardner did what a Republican needed to do, which is two things. He made inroads with Hispanic voters overall, generally Hispanic voters overall. And then secondly, with higher income whites. Okay? Republicans tend not to carry white voters by huge margins in Colorado. They just don't. And the electorate can be, and a growing number is non-white. So in 2016, it was about 12% Latino, Hispanic, and about 4% Black. But then there were 3% other race, 4% other race, 3% Asian. So the exit polls, which I dispute quite a bit, they say, they estimate the electorate was about 78% white. Well, Donald Trump only carried white voters by 75-45. So when I run this, and let me just do that now. When I run this, you're going to see why this giant chunk of independent votes, matters so much. There's a good deal of Hispanics in that vote share. So he's going to have to make inroads with them, and he's going to have to carry white voters, which he's having some problems with, and more educated white voters. This is a state where Donald Trump is having problems with those voters. 2% is not going to cut it. 47-45, 48-45, that's not going to cut it. He needs a little bit more, and he needs to beef up his share among Latino voters. So let's run this analysis, okay? Party code, gender, household income, marital status, ethnicity, education, religion, all right? All of that is in there. I'll pop Tim back in when he circles back. I see him messing with his stuff. Here's the party right off the jump. Democrats have a slight base edge, a little over 30%. Republicans, 28%. You'll notice, folks, this is not inferred. Okay, this is actual partisan. Non-affiliated voters, or what they call nuns, like in Florida, nuns. Okay, they are nearly 40% of the electorate. Nearly 40%. Again, in 2016. People who did not identify as a Republican or a Democrat, Donald Trump won them by a 45-42 margin. They made up 43% of the vote in 2016. The difference was Republicans tend to be overrepresented in public polls in Colorado. Lately, it's getting better. But in 2014 and 2012 and 2010 even, and, beyond, they, Mitt Romney, it looked like he had a chance. He never really had a chance. He just didn't. And then Mark Udall thought that he would be able to hold on. The problem is Cory Gardner did much better with this group. And then let's go down to, and then look how tight gender is. This is the overall file. So I want to stress that. When we talked about on Friday, when we talked about the screens, the voter screens, that first chart that showed the overall voter file and how many people on that overall voter file on the rolls actually voted, that was the least likely to vote category out of the four that we showed you on Friday. So this is that category. It is the entire pool of voters. We're casting a wide net. You'll notice Colorado is pretty close. With gender, it's much more male than the entire national electorate, several points. So about a net of 6 points. You would think that would help men. That would help Republicans because they do better among men than women. The problem is these voters they're more moderate and they tend to be more educated, and they're just the kind of voter that Donald Trump has an issue with. If they're moderate and liberal and they're men, then if a Republican has a better chance of winning a moderate woman than they do of winning a liberal man. I mean, it's just, it's so sometimes that don't oversimplify stuff. Okay. And then Caucasian, about 70%. You can see, and you'll see it when I do the likely voter screen in a second, that whites tend to make up a larger share of the electorate than the overall voter file. Hispanics are about 8% here. Again, in 2018 or 2016, Hispanics were 12%. So they flex their muscles a little bit more than the overall electorate, but there is a healthy amount of unknown. Some people just don't like putting it. It's not necessary, so they don't. All right. So religion, this shows you right here about 21%. That shows you the strength of the Latino voter and how it should be a warning sign that they're understated in the voter file. All right. And Protestants are about 46%. I want you guys to keep remembering that. Let's go to the 50-50. Okay. Let's do a vote propensity score. Let's look at people who are at least 50% likely to vote. All right. And then we'll map them. And I may actually go back to the other map just to, I'm going to run the count again, just in case what happened before happens. I'm going to run the map again with the larger pool to show you guys the difference. All right. Yeah, I got to hit refresh. Let's check on Tim. There he is. He's there. Welcome back, Tim. I'm running the map. You there, Tim? I don't know if you can hear.
No, yeah, I'm here. I just had the mic muted.
All right. So there we go again. Republicans had a very narrow deficit in the base. In a overall wide net electorate, they had a deficit of about 2 points. Now we're looking at an electorate that's 33% Republican, 30% or 32% Democrat, and 34% independent. Let's go back to the exit polls. If you guys remember, independents made up a much bigger share than that. Republicans were only 24% in 2016. That's it. Democrats were 32%. And independents were 43. 43. So if this ends up happening again, and you'll see with the early vote, and Tim, you've taken notice of this before, but as early vote numbers start to come in, who's voting early, who's returning ballots, Republicans, especially in the last days of it, they really pick up the pace. And sometimes they'll even overtake Democrats. But then all of these Democrat ballots come in at the end. And where, like in Florida, Republicans, they win the absentee, they lose the early in-person vote, but then they win election day, which is why we always see that left hook, that red right hook. I mean, that's why we'll see that in Florida. There's a left blue hook in Colorado because they have more to tap. And you saw that with the first screen, that first model we ran that shows you everybody. We're just casting a wide net. They have a larger amount to tap. And then again, those independents, when they do vote for the Republican, they don't vote enough. They're 43% of the electorate in 2016. Trump only carried them by 3 points. If he would have carried them by, 7, then maybe it could have gotten closer. Democrats, 32% of the electorate. Trump only took about 9%. It was one of those states, which is more than Hillary took from him during his base. But it's one of those states where Trump's crossover appeal has not been as high as in like the Midwest, in the Rust Belt, or the North, the Mid-Atlantic, or even in Florida and North Carolina for that matter. It's just one of those states. This is where, and this, I guess, now's the time to throw in with Brad, right? This is where Brad Parscale thinks they can win this state, because he thinks Trump has made progress with two groups of people. One, with Democrats, registered Democrats. He thinks he's doing better than 9%. And two, if it's true that Trump's approval rating among Hispanics in this state is like 40%, or 40, I don't know, Tim, some of the other polls you've seen, or Brad say, that he's generally in the low 40s with Hispanics now in this area.
Right.
If that's true, then that's a big difference. Trump only won.
Wasn't there a big, I can't remember the specifics, but wasn't there a big brouhaha in 16 over an anti-Trump faction among the state Republican Party in Colorado, particularly even
You're talking about during the primary, right?
Maybe that was during the primary. Yeah, that spilled over into the convention a little bit. But
yeah, and Ted Cruz sent some people there to try to take delegates away. Absolutely. There was that effort.
Maybe you think that tapped down Republican enthusiasm at all when it came to the November vote?
You know, in the end, the enthusiasm did not look good in the beginning for Republicans. It was not looking good in Colorado. At the end, the last couple of days, Republican return ballots actually overtook Democratic ballots.
Wow.
And it was getting to a point where it's like 35-33, very close to what the voter file looks like, you know. But in the end, there are a lot of independents in the state. And, you know, we got 10 minutes before we'll do the other segment, but maybe I will get into the map to prove my point here. Before I generate the map, I'll do the overlay of the other maps, Tim. Okay. Yep. And my point here is that independents, you see how close it was in 2016. They're only, if you look at the voter file, they're only about, they're still huge, but about a third, right? 33.67 right now, 34%. If you look at the overall voter file, they're like nearly 4 in 10. The exit polls had them at 43%. They're not as reliably independent. I don't know how to put this, you know, where sometimes if you break out leaners, those leaners will go generally equal to some, you know, to the Republican and the Democrat.
More of them lean Democrat.
More of them lean Democrat. Thank you. That is a simple way to put it. More of them lean Democrat than you see in many other states, and period. So you have to really win over those truly undecided voters by a larger margin to widen out that edge. And Trump's edge was only a couple of points. You know, it just wasn't enough. If you're going to be, you know, 43% Democrat, it was, like I said, it was, or no, I'm sorry, 43% independent, because it's going to be almost a third of the electorate was Democrat and only about a quarter was Republican. Now, the voter file shows, the voter file clearly shows that's not really the case. So why is that happening? It's those independents. When they talk to the exit poll or when they talk to the pollster who calls them, they're telling them they're Democrats, you know, or they lean Democrat. Right. So maybe they lean so much the pollster decided they need to be in the Democratic category. They're a leaning question. It depends on the pollster and how they do this. But in the end, they're just not true independents. And the percentage of that true independence, those true independents, the percentage for them is not enough to win over in larger margins. So it really would mean that Trump had to win those moderate whites, and I'm going to show you exactly where they are in a second. He would have to win them over better than he did in 2016, and he would have to make inroads with Hispanics to shrink that margin that's inevitably going to come from big population centers, you know, because there were, she really can give Denver a lot of credit. She got about 16,000 votes out of Adams. I don't want to get into this yet because I'll show you there is an area. Denver was like 180,000 votes, Tim, you know, net. And it's going to be like that. It's going to be. But there are areas I want to show people the difference between 2016 and Bush, what Bush did. There have been some areas where Republicans have just flatly lost. You would expect it. And then they ran up their margins in other areas that kind of offset a lot of that. There is one county in particular that really defines what's going on here, because there's not a lot of votes in some of these bigger areas, Tim. There just aren't, you know?
Right. Well, no, there's parts of the state are very sparsely populated.
Very sparsely populated. But there's two, really one. But that, I would say La Plata is a different, it's a smaller number. But if Republicans would carry it, it certainly wouldn't hurt, you know. But we're not talking about thousands of votes and thousands of votes that are net losses. And there's one, and let me just pull it up so I don't keep people like waiting here, but we have about 5 minutes before the break. We have plenty of time to get in, to the difference. Here's George Bush. All right. George Bush carried the state again against Al Gore by about 51, if you round 42, right? So it was 50.8 to 42.4. All right. If you round up to the nearest 10th. Again, Donald Trump lost it by 2.8%, roughly, right? 2.8, 47.2 minus 44.4. Yeah, just under 3 points, 2.8%. Where did he lose it? If you're looking at this map right here, all right, you can see Denver, that tiny little blotch in the northern central part of the state. That's Denver. All right, that tiny little county, lots of votes out of Denver. Again, Hillary Clinton netted about 180,000 votes out of that area. And this is not a populated state. So that's damage. But it's expected. She took about 74% of the vote. Donald Trump took just under, you ready? 19%. Here is one of the areas, though, where I would tell you, Tim, there's almost no doubt that Gary Johnson hurt Donald Trump. He took about 4.5%. And if you go back and look at Romney and go back and look at McCain and even Bush, there's a Republican vote there that went to Johnson. Somebody I saw on the thread before mentioned the Access Hollywood. A lot of early votes here, no take backsies kind of thing. You know what I mean? A lot of early votes. Maybe Access Hollywood did have something to do with it. There's just a lot of that can be speculation, but you definitely see a chunk of the vote here for Gary Johnson that is around about what he did statewide, and an underperformance by Trump in an area where Republicans tend to get about 3% more than what Trump got. So at least, it can be argued that about 3% of Gary Johnson's 4.5 in Denver probably would have went to Donald Trump. But then that means Hillary or somebody else would have gotten that remaining 1.5, So it's difficult, but there's definitely an argument to make that Gary Johnson took some. All right. Even still, Donald Trump could have carried this state. Look at where Denver is again, that tiny little blob. This is the Bush map, Bush v. Gore. If you look to the east of Denver, there are two counties. They're rectangle in shape. The one on the top is Adams County. It is a Democratic county and a traditional one. It went for Gore over Bush. It went for Kerry carried Colorado against Bush. He lost it in his reelection. It went for Kerry. The county below Adams County is called Arapahoe County. This is a problem area for Republicans and an area where Donald Trump would need to do significantly better if he was going to really carry the state. Larimer is another one, Tim. If you can see, it's in the top. It is the dead northern central county to the border, the northern border. And it was very close. It was 47.5 to 42 roughly and a half. That's another county that used to vote Republican, but no longer does. But Arapahoe County, I'm highlighting here for two reasons. There's a lot of votes there. Trump got about 117,000 votes. Hillary Clinton got about just under 160. So if you were to do better in a county like this, you could really see where the net would make a difference. Again, definitely a county where Gary Johnson almost assuredly took from Donald Trump. 16,000 votes, higher percentage-wise than what he earned statewide. He got 5.3% here. And if you go back to, then you would see that there's just a Romney Rhino vote, Tim, that is not very keen on Donald Trump. You know what I mean? So you have some wealthier to the western part of this county, the western region of this county. You have these educated, unaffiliated voters and educated, independent voters who Donald Trump would have to increase his margin among to do better in this county, because here's how he did. There's him versus Clinton. Not only did Clinton, carry this county, but it actually got bluer. it got bluer than the way it was under George Bush. That is a lot. I know what a lot of people are thinking, and it's absolutely true. A lot of this is immigration. It's just true. But that's also why that's the second part of the equation here, and why I am skeptical of what Brad Parscale argues, because this is a county we would see that happen, Tim. You know, if he really was going to increase his vote, he got 30% of the Hispanic vote in the state of Colorado. He got 30%. If he was going to truly increase his vote share enough to make a state like this competitive, we're going to have to see a significant tighten from that 20-point loss. That was a near 20-point loss. And it's an area that George W. Bush carried. Also, the county above it, to the north, like I was talking about, Larimer County, which is a George Bush carried that one too. Trump lost it by 5 points. There are almost 200,000 votes out there, about 180,000 votes. Trump would need to do better up there as well. Also down south, you see very blue right there, very, very blue, right in the southern central part of the state. Okay, that is the Trump versus Clinton map. But you can see to the east of that, there are other counties like Los Animas. He did better there if you looked compared to George Bush. There's George Bush again. You can see he lost Los Alamos. He lost the two counties above it. You can see that difference, guys. I'm flipping back and forth. That's Bush v. Gore. Bush won the state. That's Trump v. Clinton. Trump lost the state.
Is Boulder in the same county as Denver?
Boulder is in, let me just make sure before I say so. I want to say, but there's the two population centers. It's got to be, because El Paso has Colorado Springs. So, you know what? If we go to the voter
Colorado Springs is south of Denver.
Yes.
And
El Paso
Boulder
south.
Northwest just a little bit.
El Paso is...
I just asked because it's known to be a very, very,
let me
very
pull up
liberal
the other
area.
One.
And,
let me pull up the other one, and I'll be able to show you guys the difference. Well, El Paso, though, went for Trump, the entire area. And it's because, you have Colorado Springs to the west in El Paso. It's like almost dead central. I mean, dead, center, but to the west on the border of El Paso and Teller. So, but Trump carried it overall with 56.2% of the vote. He netted almost 70,000 votes out there, a little bit more. That helped him weigh down the damage that's done in places like Denver, Tim. But you can't, the point I'm trying to make is the population is so sparse in some of these other counties, you really can't undo it.
You just got to minimize the damage in the
and he's got to do better in Arapahoe. There's too many votes there. And if Brad Parscale is right and he increases his margin among Hispanic voters, then guess what? He's going to do better in Arapahoe. He's going to. So I mean, that's here. I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to get rid of the other maps. Let me show you guys where the voting population comes from. This is Colorado. Okay. Here's Denver. There's a little spot in Denver. You see me, spinning my little hand around. Here is Arapahoe. The Republicans going to carry everywhere in Arapahoe.
It's all from Denver up to Fort Collins. That's where all the population is.
That's right. And here's El Paso, which Trump carried. But if you look, Colorado Springs is here. All right.
Yeah.
This is where you can't really see it because the blob. That's right. So this is why this remains Republican. But if Donald Trump wants to carry the state, the votes are in Arapahoe, Tim. That's where they're at, And he did well in Douglas. He won about 54.5% of the vote in Douglas, which is right here, guys. And you're wondering, how could he have done that? It looks so blue. Let me show you. Let me see if this pulls up. I'm going to put the independents on there and remove the Democrats. And then it'll make you, the independents aren't loading up. They're there. They're just blending in. There's a lot of Republicans there. So you see the blue because the blue is a darker color and it merges, and there are more Democrats, but there are clearly a lot of Republicans, and El Paso was like his best county for vote shares. Vote totals, Tim, not vote shares. Mesa and all that over in the West, he did well in, but then, we would lose stupid little counties like not stupid little. He shouldn't have lost some of these areas. but this is just a change over time.
You had
You know?
or you had early voting, and a lot of people vote early for
Yeah.
if they're 10 miles or more from where they got to go vote,
Right.
right?
Right. And then
And
go
a
ahead.
lot of people in Colorado are, if you're not in Denver or Boulder or Fort Collins. And
And
there was an enthusiasm gap in Colorado. There has been for Republicans probably for 10 years now.
and San Miguel, even Bush lost. This one over here, Tim, even
Yeah.
he lost that. But La Plata, there's a lot of Republicans here. La Plata, San Juan, those are areas Trump did not carry. George Bush did. But again, a lot of this is also another area where you would see I don't know how to put this. There's a lot of migrant workers there, and
Is the governor well liked
in Colorado?
Yeah.
Hickenlooper
50-50?
Was. Yeah, I mean, I haven't
Isn't he the governor
personally.
now, Hickenlooper?
Yeah, I haven't personally polled
Right,
Hickenlooper
right.
in a long time, but
Right.
I don't even think he's out now, isn't he, Hickenlooper?
I
I think he didn't he leave to run for president?
Yes.
I thought he did. Yeah. He was, and then he had the gun grab, and that killed some of his image.
Yeah.
And there is, and again,
so you almost wonder if maybe you could have a little backlash from people that had voted, would be typically Republicans that have felt disenfranchised by the party the last couple of elections.
Yeah, well, Trump did well in Douglas. That's another area where he can run up some numbers. Like I think I already mentioned that one.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, it's really, if he was to do better in the western part of Arapahoe, which means he's going to do better among those independents, and there's so many of them there, and that just keeps getting bluer. And that isn't it. It's like, where else? Now that I'm showing you guys this, my question to like Brad and others. All right, let me zoom it out so you guys can see because I'm trying to let me show them the whole state. My question to Brad and others is, where in this state are you going to pull out enough votes to undo the damage that Denver's going to do, and then Colorado Springs is going to take out of your margin in El Paso, because Republicans win El Paso. But Colorado Springs is a nice area around there for Democrats. They do well, So it's not like a 65-35 blowout anymore, Tim. It's like 58, 57, 56.
Right.
It has to be. Now that I backed up and the database is done, it has to be in Arapahoe County. And I wish I could get just like a half zoom in, see it goes so fast, so much. But here's the rest of here's basically the population centers in the state. You do have Archuleta down here. I don't want to miss that. There's some, La Plata's a loss now. Republicans have lost that. That is, gone from the days of George Bush carrying it. And then you have a good, nice voting populations in Larimer and Weld. But the bottom line is, and I think, again, Clinton carried Larimer. If you don't make inroads here, then where else in the rest of the state do they intend to find 3.5 points? You know what I mean? Like he took Garfield. I mean, some of these areas where you look and you'll say, you know what? Over the couple of years, maybe this county shouldn't have gone to Democrats in the past, as the way demographics are changing. Why hasn't it gone? Why hasn't it shifted more? He did well in those areas, Tim.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. There's nowhere else. Rio Blanco, big county out in the northwestern area of the state. Trump carried it with 81%. That was only 2,800 votes, roughly, a little under.
Right.
I'm trying to really underscore the importance of, you got to not just get votes. You got to get votes where there are the most votes.
Right.
And it's very difficult. The only way he can do that, Logan was a good county for him too, 75%, but it only netted him about 6,000 votes, a little less.
Right.
The only place he can do that is if he tightens that margin in Arapahoe. And, there are other places he could do better. He could do better in Adams, by the way. It would be a wash. Like, he lost Adams by about not 8 points, right? But it was only a 16,000 net vote difference. And, Alamoso is small. He could take that one. I mean, if you really press for it, Clear Creek was very close. So was Gilpin, which is north of Clear Creek. Here, let me show them where that is. Here's Gilpin. Here's Clear Creek. we were only talking about a couple thousand votes here, guys.
Right.
He really needs to make it up in Arapahoe. And if he does, if he was to make it up in the western part of the state, then that would tell me that he's going to do better in other areas where there are similar demographics. Like El Paso, he's not going to win anymore by 56%. He'll maybe hit 61. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that'll widen it out. So I see a lot of comments, which means there's probably a lot of questions, and I want to get to them. We need to get.
Definitely get to the questions.
Yeah, I went over the market update thing, Tim. Let's do that real quick, and then we'll circle back to the questions, because Colorado is one of those states where Republicans are like, it's right there, two under 3 points. It was so close.
Right.
I want to hit the questions when we get back, especially given what the Trump campaign says. All right, so I'm going to leave this up until we do this market update here. So it's 11:40. I'm going to do it really quick, guys. It's Tuesday, April 28th. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. Today we're talking about Colorado running a voter analysis. If you don't follow me on Twitter, go ahead and do so at Peoples_Pundit. And I'm joined by Tim, the Source Anderson. Follow him on Twitter at TJAnderson1. All right, and he's going to give us a market update real quick. When I come back, we'll answer questions and we'll go from there. All right, Tim, take it away, buddy.
So stocks are doing a little better. I mean, the Russell is now up 1%. We've been talking about it a lot because it had a big move yesterday. It was up 4% yesterday. It was up as much as 2%. It went slightly negative. Now it's up a little over 1%. I think we're going to see this back and forth action all day long in the market. The Dow has come off its lows and is green. NASDAQ is still off by 0.2%. And the S&P 500 is just slightly negative. The market's shrugging off this decline in oil. It's largely a technical decline, where a lot of the ETF funds are shifting out of this near-term oil contract, which of course is the one they'll always highlight on the screen when they talk about the price of oil. So
no, that was great, Tim. You did that. That was great. You went through that like bing, 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 bing. So go ahead. What were you going to say?
That's it, really. I mean, I think we're going to see this back and forth action, trading between moderate gains and losses, maybe for the remainder of the day. Hard to tell at this point how we finish. I think if we just held our own today and kept on to a good chunk of yesterday's gains, it would be positive for the psyche of the market.
Good stuff. All right, let's answer some questions. Let's get into some, I guess, right? So I did this with Minnesota, and this is a good idea, I guess, to do again with Colorado, because if we were to, let's say he was making a big push for this state, okay, this is what I would do. Can we have this screen back again? Let me bring back this screen. Let me add this, okay? There it is. Only I would like Tim and I in there too. Okay. With Minnesota, I said if he was running through a circle, right? Because the question was, which one is the best state? If I know they're both heavy lifts, but which one is the best use of resources for the Trump campaign? Would it be Colorado or would it be New Mexico? All right. It would be Colorado. We're going to do New Mexico tomorrow. New Mexico it was closer last time because all the political stars aligned. You had a very former popular governor on the ballot there. People would say, well, wouldn't that take away from Republicans? Again, maybe not. How did Gary Johnson? He won handily with his governor races. He was very popular in his reelection. He didn't just win Republicans to do that. He won clearly votes that would go to a Democratic candidate. And we can look into that tomorrow. Well, I'll show you that tomorrow. If it was me, if it was me, not to give free advice here, I would go to Colorado. But there are, and this dovetails into some other questions about where, right? And they were mentioning Colorado Springs. There is no doubt. And where's my handy trusty map here? Here is Colorado Springs. All right. And then somebody else asked about increasing the vote share in Douglas. All right. Here's Arapahoe, which we were talking about. I was stressing how important that is. There are so many votes in the western part of this county. There are so many votes. And this is where Republicans get clobbered. If I was to put back the partisans, all right, because I want you guys to see Democrats too. They just overshadow. When you see the red bleed out, It's telling you that there are more Republicans there, kind of like surrounding them and boxing them in. Douglas is here. Colorado Springs is up a little bit. Up in the northern area of El Paso, that is a Trump county. All right. Douglas was also a very good Trump county. He won 54.7% of the vote there. You have to increase turnout, of course, where you won, and then you have to minimize the damage. There's not a whole lot you can do about Denver. They're going to kill you there. That was 180,000 vote net for Hillary Clinton out of Denver. You could try to minimize that, but they have overlapping markets. So if I was the Trump campaign trying to flip the state of Colorado, I would go Colorado Springs, Douglas, Western Arapahoe. Colorado Springs, Douglas, Western Arapahoe. Why? Because the rest of El Paso, as Tim was talking about with the military, they're going to vote for you anyway in high numbers, and they're going to vote. You have to get this blue blob over here that gives Democrats a 40-something chunk of the vote. You have to lower them down to like, let me just do some quick math here and see what's reasonable. So in El Paso, she got about 33.9% of the vote. This is where that's coming from because the rest of it is, he beat her pretty good out here. But if he could drag her down, Tim, to like 31%, 30%, yeah, right, which is not unreasonable. It's doable. If he would just keep going to Colorado Springs, Douglas, Arapahoe. And again, the point, you're not going to flip Arapahoe like George Bush had it. That's not going to happen anymore. It's a different place. What you want to do is try to increase your vote share. Trump only got 38.6%, 41%, folks, 41, 42%. Again, doable. If you're constantly just swinging the rest of the state, and it's not to minimize anyone. You never want to ignore anybody. But there's some areas, San Miguel, you're going to do terrible here because I don't even want to try to pronounce that. I'm not Hispanic. My wife is, I'm not going to try, but that is a small county with a populous town in it. And that's why it goes Democrat. There are Republicans there. It's just, there are more Democrats. There's not that many votes out there. If you were to try to appeal to these groups of people, and you have almost, Tim, all three groups that I would be targeting are in these three counties. So you have your base in the military plus the more affluent white vote in Colorado Springs. In Douglas, you have what is also a very traditional Republican vote, but the northeastern part of the state, you're bleeding into the more affluent white voters there as well. And then in Arapahoe, you have those more affluent white voters, and you have Hispanic voters now that are out also to more working, politically matured voters. And what I mean by that is just a term. It means they're more, they have more skin in the game, I guess. What's the word I'm looking for, Tim? They have higher home ownership rates. They have higher labor force participation rates. They're more politically matured. What's the word?
They're not going to be pro open borders voters.
Right. Those are the Hispanics. Thank you, Tim.
Even though they're Hispanics and their lineage is probably from Mexico or Central America.
Right.
They're not going to be pro open borders.
Right. And that is the group.
Well, he could have a shot with some of them.
Well, absolutely. Those are the people, Tim, that you'll poll Colorado, which is heavily Hispanic now. And you'll poll them and you'll say, don't mention anybody's name. Simply mention the policy and ask them whether or not they support a physical barrier on the southern border to prevent illegal immigration. Whether or not immigration to the United States should be a merit-based system or a family-based system. I'm telling you, Tim, the vast majority, big majorities, will agree with the Republican and the Trump position. Right. The minute you throw a name in there, or you throw a hot button word,
political party.
That's right. Or the wall, which is a very politicized word term. The minute you throw that in there, you're going to screw the survey. You're going to screw it up. You tainted it with bias. The policy is what matters. If you simply appeal to these three groups of people, there are so many votes here. Again, I can't stress this enough. There are so many votes. You cannot have a 60. You can't lose Denver by 180,000 net votes and then lose Arapahoe by 60 or 80,000. You can't do it. You got to cut that to 40. 25 would be even better. I know it sounds crazy. It's a high, reaching for the stars, but it's not. Look, it's not. It
can be done.
Yes, it's not unreasonable to expect Trump to get 42 or even 43% of the vote in Arapahoe County. He got 38.6. Johnson took 5.3. That's only, when I say 41%.
So
that's 11,000 more votes. That's it. Out of all of those votes,
3/4 of that Johnson vote could be Trump.
It's how
2/3 to 3/4.
You know how I am with that. So I'm like, I'm being cautious here, but it's doable. It's also doable to drag a Democrat down to 33% in Douglas County, which is just north of El Paso. She got 36.6%. If you would have drug her down to 33% of the vote in Douglas County, if you would have drug her down to 31% in El Paso, which again is doable. Johnson took 6.2% in El Paso, Tim.
Yeah.
That's 20,000 votes almost. That could have easily.
Right.
And if you go to prior elections, you'll see Cory Gardner. He walloped Mark Udall in those areas. He walloped him. It's doable. I'm being conservative. But you're going to waste your time. It's less Trump post 2016, more Trump 2016 or pre 2016. And what I mean by that is, don't ignore the rural areas, but you have to be reasonable enough to understand that those, or not reasonable, you have to be realistic is the point, that those there are too many votes there to make it up in the rest of the state. I left this up for a reason, because when you have like a map like this, and I show you there's Trump v. Clinton, here's Bush v. Gore. It really doesn't give you an idea. If I was to use like a tree map where I would allocate based on vote share, you would see the smallest little town grow to about almost a third of the map. And then the rest of it, would be surrounding in Arapahoe and in El Paso. So you got to do better in Arapahoe, or drag up that vote share just a few more points. And you got to drag down their vote share in Douglas and in El Paso a few more points. It's absolutely doable. And there are a couple little counties, Tim, where Trump flipped, that he'd obviously have to hold on to them. And let me move this around so they can see it. But Los Animas, he did very well in Los Animas. He's gonna have to hold Los Animas because George W. Bush, he lost that. He lost the other one. Again, I'm going to try to butcher this. Like Huerfano. Is that how you say it? Huerfano?
I don't know. I can't even see it.
George W. Bush lost that. He also lost Pueblo. Trump carried that. He'd have to hold all of that. Trump barely carried Pueblo, but he did so good. That is like that's that worker vote, Tim, and the more rural, like that used to be, those people used to be battleground voters back in 2000 and 2004. They used to be battleground voters. Those are trending, kind of like the way Erie County or Luzerne in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That's very, very similar. They're, not big city areas. And Trump won those voters by like a half a point. You know what? Because it's so close, I'll bring it up. It was in Pueblo County. Trump got 36,265 votes. That was 46.1%. Clinton got 45.6 with percent. So what? A half a point.
Half a percent.
Yeah. And she got 35,875 votes. You ready for this? Gary Johnson got, again, more than his state average, 5.2%, which was about 4,072 votes. Not about, exactly 4,072 votes. Jill Stein only got 942, which was about 1.2%. That's it. So you can see there's, again, it would suggest that if somebody wanted to pull a lever for now, this is a little bit more of an argument, Tim, for Johnson taking votes from Trump, because if they wanted in a place like Pueblo, if they wanted to vote for the Democratic candidate, but they couldn't bring themselves to vote for Trump, they have Stein there. You know what I mean? And she got there's such a big difference in Stein and Johnson's vote share.
Yeah.
He
was a governor of a neighboring state.
That's right.
Plus, he had the pro marijuana legalization thing working in his favor. That's definitely an issue. Was an issue in 2016 in Colorado.
And she underperformed her state average in a county like this, where Johnson either hits it or overperforms his state average. And then you see Stein underperforming her state average. That would be an indication that those are Trump votes that could have went to Trump, you know? So again, but we're talking about a difference of, let's see. So let's say Trump netted another 3,000 out of there, Tim, you know, so he lost the state overall. He needs to make up around 140,000 votes. Right, it's nice to peel away 4,000 here, 2,000, 5,000, 8,000 in some of these other counties, but he's got to make up those areas.
But you got to make a serious dent in those high population areas.
That's it. That's my point. And you can't do it. So with a couple of minutes left, let me just run through the summary here. This is why Arapahoe is why Brad has to be right. If he's arguing Colorado's in play, he has to be right about a significant increase in support among Hispanics. Around this area, you're going to see about 28% voted for Donald Trump. That's it. Statewide, it was 30. He would really need those percentages that Brad's talking about. So Brad better be sure, is what I'm saying. And I don't think he is my point. I think that wouldn't happen, Tim, without repeated visits. I mean, he needs to target these people, and then that's in Arapahoe, and then you also have some of those more affluent whites and moderates and independents. Moderates, the wrong word. He only carried them by 3. These 3 areas alone, Tim, could drag his margin among independents much higher, or could have. And he did go to Colorado Springs. He did.
Yeah, he did. He did.
But these areas, he's got to go to these other areas. And also, again, I'm not saying to ignore the rural area, but that is where he's deficient in. These areas, not the rural area. The rural area, he has outsized support in right now. So, I'm not saying ignore them. His whole message appeals to them. He has to bring that message to higher population centers. That's my point. Yeah. That's my point. Let me see if I can... It's 11:57. There was last question. There was a third party candidate in Bush v. Gore. It was Ralph Nader, and Ralph Nader took about 5.25%, and that's roughly close. Then, yeah, I know
that had to be way above his national average.
Yeah, it was one of those states where Democrats said, you know what, if Ralph Nader wasn't there,
to some degree,
yeah. If Ralph Nader wasn't there, and they proved it 4 years later. George Bush lost. Let me just bring it up. I know we got time. 4 years later, George Bush. He did carry it against Kerry. That's right. He carried it against Kerry, but Kerry got close without a third-party candidate on the ballot. The problem was Bush's margin among Democrats increased, and it was really Hispanic Democrats. And that is why he was able to increase his vote share by about 1.5 points. Once Obama came along, Colorado and New Mexico and Nevada were gone. And that is the challenge. Yeah, there have been demographic shifts, but Obama really drove a wedge in that Hispanic vote. It was never that wide. He drove a wedge, and that is what has to be undone if a Republican wants to, not undone, but damaged. It has to be chipped into if a Republican wants to carry the state of Colorado. All right, well, we got about a minute left. Let me do the spiel here, Tim, and then tomorrow we're going to do New Hampshire. I hope that guys gave you a much better understanding of
New Mexico, you mean?
State like Colorado. Yes, tomorrow we're going to do New Mexico, which is a very heavy lift, very heavy lift. But that was good. I hope that at least scratched the surface of some of those challenges, because they're like exponentially worse in New Mexico. And we're gonna see that tomorrow. All right. So guys, if you were watching on Periscope, which I noticed a lot of you jumped onto YouTube, I'm actually glad about that. If you were watching on Periscope, give us the likes, the hearts before you guys go, and don't forget to follow the accounts. If you are on Facebook Live or YouTube, then on Facebook, like the page, and on People's Pundit Daily, and then on YouTube, subscribe to People's Pundit Daily's channel. We are continuing to increase. We want to hit that milestone. All right. And the ultimate way to support the show, folks, is of course subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. You can do so ppdnews.us/subscribe. But thanks for watching here today on Tuesday. We'll join you again tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. We'll do the markets. We'll do New Mexico. We'll have a great time. Follow along on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. And I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. Follow him on Twitter, folks, at TJ Anderson1. And we will see you back 10 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday. All the best, folks.